personally vouch for this stiff metal motherfucker. He's one of us. Ethan, what's the Navy's official policy for a gunfight?
Send in the Marines.
As for you, Captain.
This week brings us back to the indomitable king of the industry in its newest iteration, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, a game that had a similar pre-release hype build-up to Battlefield 1's proclamation of historical shooter reclamation, in that Infinity Ward's next game was being hailed as an absolute disaster months before it came out, between the mass disliking of its first trailer and the subsequent bashing of the futuristic setting by the loudest of longtime fans. This game has been dragged through the shit so many times that it managed to furrow my septic tank. But all of that doesn't matter because the game's finally out and we're finally gonna get a look at it. The game starts with our main character, Nick Reyes, a man so dynamic that I had to Google him just to remember his first name, being posted on board the Retribution with longtime co-worker Salter, who fills the role of typical no-nonsense aggressive girl type to the point that she has the relationship skills of a 30-pound walleye. And then there's the other side characters with names like Gator, Griff, and McCallum that stand around, say vaguely action movie type things, and they try to help out with their Captain Shepard's quest to single-handedly save planet Earth. Around the first 20 minutes into the game, after you've passed the opening parade, also known as the Infinite Warfare tech demo of how cool they can make spaceships look to get you excited about piloting them later, the Armed Forces commander is murdered by the villain, and Reyes has been promoted to Captain Generic before he's even gotten his morning coffee. And good thing too, because he takes the responsibility of leading the entire military diligently and seriously by going into every single combat personally, and he does all of his work for all of his soldiers. It's great to see that Mass Effect hasn't been forgotten quite yet in 2016, and those jobs are in service to the ultimate goal of defeating the Settlement Defense Front, a group that's doing the typical thing whenever a story is set on Mars, attempting to defend their planet from the resource-hungry Earthlings, who are the ones who colonized Mars in the first place to get the resources that the Earth no longer has. And that could have been a decent place to start the usual ambiguous morality plot, except Infinity Ward had no patience to deal with gray ethics, so instead of that, the SDF becomes the most comical and bafflingly evil group of villains ever written. They even show the SDF troops murdering civilians and babies because apparently Infinity Ward just assumed that the audience couldn't tell someone was evil if they didn't bang them over the head with it 50 times. Even the loading screens continue this cartoon-level villainy by showing the leader of SDF actively fighting against the concept of freedom. And I can't believe I have to say this, but this whole thing isn't how you make a good villain. People like bad guys, such as Vaz, Montenegro, and Joker, because there's actual thought put into their plans, and it's entertaining to watch them strut their stuff. And then you have villains like General Koch here who have the intelligence of cardboard painted with 15 coats of evil, who become the most boring motherfucker to ever sit on the Iron Throne. And that's the thing, in spite of all the work that Infinity Ward put into their grand space exploration intense war game for the fate of an entire planet, the game is profoundly dull, mostly due to the potential of a science fiction plot being tossed out the nearest airlock, and it boils down to the most of the game taking place in the same shootouts from the modern warfare games, just painted a different color depending if the player is on the moon, or Saturn, or on Monolith, one of the moons of Neptune that I just made up right now. Hell, the most science fiction thing in this entire game is Ethan, one of the game's characters who is a legitimate AI-controlled soldier bot who ironically is the best character out of the entire squad because he's funny, sarcastic, has flaws, and is put into the middle of a pseudo-class warfare thing that gets discussed for all of 5 seconds before the next Warzone simulator starts. It's a good thing that Infinity Ward tried to break up their typical Infinity Ward shoot the bad man's game with the game's other staple, spaceship combat, where the player is given a fancy giant space car equipped with 2 guns and some nice playgrounds to shoot more bad men for a bit. Activision and Infinity Ward really doubled down on the idea that this was going to be the most fun thing ever because about half of the game is spent inside your space cart. But in the end, it's about as fun as finishing tedious quests in World of Warcraft. What happens in these sections is that the player is sent out to shoot at 3 different types of enemies who have near 0 chances of killing you, fly around for a bit as they fail to fly away from you, and all for the benefit of some vague anti-Mars war things that don't have anything to do with the main plot. Yeah, Infinite Warfare does something unprecedented in the series and gives the player side missions to complete that feel like obligatory dull-as-dirt Memorpager quests, to the point that when I beat all of those missions, it showed that only 8% of players had bothered to do these things through attaining the rare achievement status attached. And what makes this worse is that if you keep to the critical path and fuck all the side missions in the ear, then the main quest is around a pitiable 5 hours at best. So if you want to get the full value from your fancy $60 video game shooty fun times, then you'd better waste all your time and get these boring ass missions finished. What makes them even worse is that Infinite Warfare has the stupidest mission transitions I've ever seen outside of the moronic Kingdom Hearts gummy ships, because before every mission, the game makes you sit and watch the entire launch of your spaceship in real time, complete with repetitive QTE nonsense, and after you waste 5 minutes watching that for the 7th time, the game just dumps you to a loading screen. So please explain to me one legitimate reason why we have to do the launch sequence every time if you were just gonna hit us with a loading screen anyway. Thankfully, the entire game isn't boring and stupid, because around the halfway point when the game indiscriminately murders one of those invisible side characters no players cared about, Infinity Ward goes in a different direction than usual and tries to make Captain Generic feel despair at the loss and gets into a bit of an argument with Salter about the priorities of war. And that could have been interesting if any of the characters had actual human feelings. Because, and just for the sake of argument, let's compare this scene to the conflict despair scene in Halo 4, where Cortana was falling apart because of her AI Alzheimer's. The humans had just been eradicated by the Didact's composer. And all of that despair after seeing that had emotionally broken her to a believable degree because she was casting self-doubt on herself to actually be effective in helping Master Chief beat the Didact. It was looking like the Didact may actually take over the planet Earth with his murder device. And Master Chief was there because, you know, he's the emotional rock that Cortana is riding this wave with. You compare that to what they were doing here with the priorities of war nonsense. They get over it super quickly, and it's never brought up ever again throughout this entire game. You know, it's really just something they put in to try and have an emotional moment without actually understanding what feelings and what the weight of words are. It's basically the equivalent of just writing "insert sad moment here" instead of actually understanding what makes something sad. And that's just the start of it, since the game's final mission has the player participate in a sort of Final Destination suicide mission, where everyone is sacrificed in order to fully destroy the Mars military construct. This was the point that Infinite Warfare tried to be Halo Reach even harder than Bungie did, in giving all of these characters a traumatic death and showing it affecting Captain Generic's judgment, but the major problem is that you've shown around 7 character deaths in the space of a half hour. And since the characters themselves are so boring and the conflict is so played out, that all these deaths don't actually mean anything. In Halo Reach, the deaths of Noble Team were profoundly grave and had gravity to them because the entire conflict was a lost cause, and the humans were trying to salvage what they could from a dying planet. Noble Team knew the cost of their actions and they accepted them without question. And then you see the Retribution crew keeps getting killed by things they couldn't see coming, and it doesn't work because the game itself is killing people rather than the conflict making it necessary. And then there's the fact that the characters are getting killed so suddenly, then there's no chance to react, especially when you didn't get to know any of these people in the first place. I can respect the effort that Infinity Ward put forth to try and be the next Halo Reach, and give some meaning to characters that would have been written off in 7 seconds in any of their other games, but if you're going to do that, then you need to put effort and respect into the actual characters. Infinite Warfare almost redeemed that when they decided to play the characters' dying words over the credits scroll, and while I appreciated that part of the game since it showed the characters had actual feelings, the thing that disappointed me most about this entire game experience was when I had gotten an achievement for listening to all of the dying letters that just happened to be a rare achievement because only 8% of the game's players bothered to listen to all of them. It's just one of those things that makes me heartily disappointed in people that they couldn't be bothered to show any care for any of the game's characters. Especially since it would have only taken you 3 minutes out of your lives. So, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare was the attempt that Infinity Ward made to capitalize on the success of Treyarch's sci-fi concept introduction to the series, and it failed to attain any of the lofty goals that the developer set out for the game, because the villain is as bland as milk, the conflict doesn't mean anything, the only interesting character is the robot, and the game's unique selling point in the spaceship combat makes half of the game devolve into boring World of Warcraft quests for no benefit other than achievements. Even when the game turned around and tried to out-despair Halo Reach, it ended up not working because I couldn't care about any of the characters and they were being discarded as fast as Cheez-Its at a party. The big thing was that people were condemning Infinite Warfare as the downfall of the entire series, which is ridiculous because Call of Duty can rebound from any failure. But the game's definitely not as bad as Ghosts, or the N-Space games, and ultimately the game's just a boring waste of the futuristic setting's potential, and is your typical Infinity Ward game. What we really need is an innovative idea from the original COD developer, because right now, Treyarch is the king of this series, and we all know that this developer can do better. Hopefully next year will be more interesting for this series, but for now, let's finish our jaunt into space with a final scoreboard. And a tried and tested victory for gamers. I'll see you guys on the next battlefield.